It is my pleasure to introduce Professor Mustafa, who has mentored and trained me in the field of nephrology, and currently we work together in Kidney Care Home Healthcare Center. Professor Mustafa pioneered the discipline of nephrology and started the first hemodialysis in Dubai as early as 1980.
Thank you, Dr. Naila, for this generous introduction, and I'm delighted to have the chance to share my thoughts with you all today.
Professor Mustafa, I have listened to many stories from you throughout my career, and I have always been fascinated by them. And I always wanted you to share these stories with others, especially in this part of the world and with the members of our nephrology society. Today, let's shed some light on how you started dialysis treatment.
To start hemodialysis as early as the year 1980, Dr. Naila, in Dubai was a monumental task, which is reminiscent of the experience of Dr. Kolf's dialysis endeavors in the difficult wartime in 1945. Dr. Kolf, as you know, is the father of dialysis. He is a Dutch nephrologist born in 1911 and who invented the first hemodialysis machine in 1934 and used it during World War II, saving many lives. Our task in dialysis was great not only because hemodialysis in the world was in its infancy, but also because adapting the Scotch temperate environment experience, where I trained to a totally inhospitable environment with a sweltering heat where the ambient temperature may exceed 50 degrees centigrade, stubbornly eluded us and acted as a major deterrent to starting the program. However, I believe our experience paved the way for the subsequent developments in dialysis in the region, and this endeavor was not just a medical project, it was an adventure fraught with obstacles and mysteries that demanded ingenuity, resilience, and courage.
Absolutely. The heat in this part of the world must have been a big challenge then. And I'm sure you're going to share all those amazing stories and challenges you met with. We now live in an era of high-tech machines and equipment and an increased workforce. How do you compare between now and then in terms of equipment?
Okay, the dialysis machines we used at that time, as you may see in the photo, were very simple from a technical perspective, and they were not foolproof. In other words, changes can occur in the dialysis without the machine being able to sense that. And moreover, the operator can override the safety window with no visual or auditory alarm occurring.
So what impact does this have on our current experience of the nephrology staff?
Reiterating this experience, indeed, after 4 decades is not without objective. It compares and contrasts practices in an attempt to bridge the gap between the old and new generation of nephrologists. The young nephrologist now will prescribe a dialysis treatment for the dialysis nurse who will execute the treatment while the nephrologist is sitting in his clinic. Earlier, the nephrologist was everyone: the treating physician, the dialysis nurse, the technologist, and even the biomedical engineer.
Certainly, now it is a teamwork where a lot of support comes from a technical staff, despite of the intelligent machines and with the extra safety features. Now, talking about the first hemodialysis in Dubai, how was it accepted by the patients and the hospital management?
When we thought we were ready, it became an uphill battle that needed a few weeks to convince the authorities in the hospital to approve the first hemodialysis session that we could perform on a brain-dead patient. And this was ultimately commenced on May the 5th, 1980. The dialysis apparently went on smoothly, lasting for about 30 minutes.
So your first dialysis was on a brain-dead patient. But why did it only last 30 minutes?
Only 30 minutes because the objective was not dialysis itself. but rather trying the dialysis setup. You might have also noticed that the dialysis ended uneventfully because of obvious reasons.
Yes, certainly, we did not expect much reaction from a brain-dead patient. But then, when did you perform dialysis on a real patient, and what was the outcome?
The team members waited impatiently to be able to perform hemodialysis on a real patient. And a couple of weeks later, there appeared to be the first opportunity. The staff were anxious to accomplish the mission, and so the patient was connected to the dialysis machine, whose feed water came directly from the municipal water supply, as I used to do in Scotland. Half an hour later, the patient was in agony, complaining of unbearable dryness of the mouth and heat. The dialysis was immediately discontinued, leaving the team grappling with unanswered questions as to what could have happened. The patient was observed, temperature was found to be high, and the serum sodium reached 160 millimoles. This closed the chapter for a seemingly dangerous therapeutic procedure, awaiting search results to unravel the history.
And where did you find the real problem was?
It appeared obvious to us that the problem lay in the water quality. Water quality may appear an insignificant issue in the current scenario of readily available effective water treatment for dialysis, although not unexpectedly, this issue created great hindrance to the success of dialysis in that time. Back in the early days of dialysis, the global understanding of water treatment for the procedure was rudimentary at best. Water for dialysis was hitherto not globally treated in a hospital routine fashion, and where I trained, the dialysis machine was connected directly to water tap faucet with no additional water purification. Despite that, the dialysis conductivity never deviated from the set window, and that is very characteristic of the water in Scotland. So
you learned that you needed to purify water to enable dialysis to be executed.
Yes, you are absolutely correct. The need to purify water for dialysis was not widely recognized in the early days of dialysis because the number of patients was small and survival was poor. However, the increasing dialysis population and increasing survival have revealed several toxic consequences of exposure to independently and inadequately treated water.
Okay.
And the quest to purify water for dialysis became a top priority. We experimented with several methods, each presenting its own set of challenges. It was clear then, as you noted, that the chemical quality of water had to be improved. At that time, the Dubai drinking water was a mixture of brackish and desalinated water. The proportion of each depended on the geographic location in Dubai. Water was so hard that when it stood for some time in a glass, you could see a white precipitate of calcium forming a ring.
Oh, these are very interesting observations. And of course, you had to comply with the international standards of water consumption. It was obvious then that the water for dialysis needed stringent treatment.
Yeah, standards for drinking water, as you know, are currently calculated as a water intake of 2 or 14 liters per day or per week. In contrast, patients receiving 12 hours of hemodialysis a week are exposed to approximately 360 liters of water during this time period. Moreover, contaminants from drinking water can reach the bloodstream only when absorbed from the gastrointestinal tract, whereas contaminants in the dialysis water have only the dialysis membrane to penetrate. Additionally, even after contaminants are absorbed from the drinking water, the healthy individual has his kidneys capable of excreting these toxic substances, a privilege which is not available with the dialysis patient.
Oh yes, of course. It is unfortunate that the dialysis patients are devoid of this privilege. And then you passed through many hurdles. while purifying water for dialysis, and you have many interesting stories and events. Would you like to share those?
Well, the earliest, easiest, simplest, and cheapest way we could follow was using deionizing columns, where calcium was exchanged for sodium in an attempt to ameliorate water hardness. This answer was found not to be appropriate because the whole column of resin was exhausted in under 3 hours. Patient sodium increased to dangerous levels, and the water temperature rose steadily that the dialysis had to be terminated prematurely. The conclusion was therefore that form of water treatment was prohibitively expensive and unsuitable. We realized that water treatment required more chemical, physical, and sometimes biological processes to remove contaminants. Reducing the temperature of feed water was also a hurdle to be overcome.
Was there any further step in the water purification then?
Yes, next we resorted to what we thought at the time to be a more reasonable approach. We heated the water to boiling level, evaporated it, condensed it, and stored it in a tank as distilled water. Ingeniously, we used copper coils from window air conditioners immersed in the water tanks to cool the water. This workaround allowed us to successfully complete several 4-hour dialysis sessions, but then we noticed something alarming a couple of weeks later. The copper coils turned green and had apparently reacted with the soft acidic water, forming copper sulfate, and this toxic compound could have contributed to cases of anemia in some patients.
Oh yes, I remember you mentioning this toxic compound earlier on several occasions. How did you deal with that?
To overcome the problem of copper sulfate, we placed a water filter prior to the site of permeate water mixing with concentrate in order to minimize copper reacting and reaching the dialysate, and apparently this did work.
So, with increasing number of patients, treating water by distillation was certainly found to be inadequate. Did you resort to any more effective methods to assure constant water supply of the right quality?
Now, when the number of dialysis patients increased, the quantity of distilled water, despite its shortcomings, could not meet the increasing demand. We then turned to a technology of reverse osmosis in an attempt to increase the water volume. And although this appeared satisfactory, it was not without its own complications to maintain a constant water supply without interruption at the right pressure, and also to maintain the right temperature for permeate water. To resolve the first obstacle, we used a massive stainless steel tank to store the water. We also used booster pumps to maintain adequate pressure. To overcome the problem of high temperature, the tank was kept in a big water treatment room whose temperature was controlled using several ACs. The tank was so immense that it could not be passed through the hospital doors. To reach its destination in the water treatment room, it had to be airborne and then dropped through the ceiling by a helicopter. To combat the extreme hardness of the feed water, several purification devices were put in series. These involved a number of filters, including charcoal and sand filters, in order to soften the municipal water before reaching the RO system. Additional ultrasound water treatment systems were added to break down and inactivate waterborne pathogens.
Wow, what an amazing journey. And what is your overall reflection on this revolution?
Well, looking back, the early days of dialysis in Dubai were a testament to human ingenuity and perseverance. Today's nephrologists, equipped with advanced machines and ready-made solutions, might find it hard to imagine the struggles of their predecessors. In those days, the nephrologist was not just a physician, but also a nurse, a technologist, and an engineer. From the first tentative steps to the sophisticated systems in place today, the evolution of dialysis in Dubai tells a story of trial and triumph, of science and spirit, and of a group of dedicated individuals who refused to give up.
It is a great pleasure to know all this from a person who introduced dialysis service to this part of the world and who paved the way for the treatment which is now meeting the international standards of dialysis treatment. Currently, we work jointly in home hemodialysis service in Kidney Care Home Healthcare Center, where Professor Mustafa is the CEO and I am the CMD of the company. This gives us the opportunity to apply all our knowledge and experience to provide standard care to our patients.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, as a motivation to gain work experience, as stated by Royal Bennett, some things cannot be taught. They must be experienced. You never learn the most valuable lessons in life until you go through your own journey.